If there's a prize for rotten judgment.
Hello, dears, and welcome to my show. I'm your friendly neighborhood librarian, reading the stinkers and praising the masterpieces since 2012. I'm a big fan of Japanese animation. I find much of it sophisticated and intelligent. The United States maintains this mindset that cartoons are only for kids, for the most part. I mean, you do have Family Guy, King of the Hill, and Futurama, among others that are made for an adult audience, but I find that even shows like that tend to cater to the lowest denominator. The Japanese, on the other hand, have their sillier, funnier, goofier, kid-friendly animated shows too, don't get me wrong. But they also tell effective, gripping, well-written dramas. They treat animation as a storytelling medium like any other. That's the respect that I believe animation deserves, and it opens the door for so many fantastic things. Animation isn't constrained by the limitations of live action. The sky is literally the limit. Animators have free reign over the universe, so to speak. The value of anime, to me anyway, is how imaginative and creative it is, how far the creators are willing to go to tell a meaningful story, how magical and important it can be, not to mention the entertainment factor and the often brilliant artwork. Japanese styles of animation are usually stunning to look at, simply gorgeous and breathtaking. And yes, it can also be kawaii. Come on, you just knew I had to say that. Today the subject of our interest is a manga called Jigoku Shoujo, or in English, Hell Girl. To get the ball rolling, I'll take you through the basic story first. Enma Ai, an adolescent girl, is the mysterious boatman to Hell. Her job is to appear to any person who has entered a name into the Hell Correspondence website and offer retribution.
I will have vengeance. I will have salvation.
But revenge comes at a steep price.
I'm not asking much. Just a token, really, a trifle. You'll never even miss it. What I want from you is your voice.
Well, actually, your soul. As Enma Ai explains, when a curse is wrought, 2 graves are dug. The manga, like the anime before it, is comprised of mostly self-contained stories about people running into misfortune and turning to the website as a last resort. The only recurring characters are mysterious and don't talk much about their pasts and origins. There's Enma Ai, of course, and her 3 helpers, the handsome and youthful-looking Ichimoku Rin, the beautiful and no-nonsense woman Hone Onna, and the elderly curmudgeon Wan Yudo. This story is different from all the others I've reviewed in that it does not follow a singular narrative. Well, that and it's illustrated. I like pictures. But the inclusion of art is interesting in that these books are technically a visual media. Rather than a description of the setting, we receive pictures. Rather than an author describing inner thoughts and feelings, we actually see facial expressions and the occasional thought floating around the character's head. My point being is that reviewing a novel and reviewing a manga volume are 2 entirely different beasts. Here's another point of interest. The anime actually came first. That's right, this manga is actually an adaptation, equivalent to a movie novelization in history. Now, movie novelizations are generally written for hire, with an author looking to make a quick buck rather than write a story that he or she has conceived and loves. Miyuki Eito, the author of the Jigoku Shoujo manga, does not come across like this. Her enthusiasm bleeds through the page. There are even endearing notes throughout the text, similar to author's notes in fan fiction, which are unheard of in professional American literature, but further serve to bridge the gap between artist and audience. I found myself becoming genuinely fond of the author as she profusely thanked the reader for buying the product and related her struggles writing and illustrating the manga. This is a cultural divide. I'm sure that part of the reason I was so charmed by these notes is that I'm just not used to seeing them in the United States. But Miyuki Edi's love for the story really shone through, and I feel that made me more receptive to the work. Good thing too, because the story isn't spectacular. I noted before how this manga is comprised of vignettes instead of a narrative. At least that's how it starts out, and how it continues for a good long while. To some extent this is understandable because the source material starts out similarly and only really develops a strong storyline in its second season. But loyalty to the source material doesn't appear to be Miyuki Eito's main concern. There are some stories ripped straight from the anime, but most of them make their debut here. In addition, the art style is very different. The anime uses lots of deep, harsh colors, lots of reds, lots of shadows, and the human designs are very unique, whereas in the manga they seem more standard. Of course, the manga is in black and white, but the covers display brighter colors than were used in the anime, and in addition, the characters are drawn in a soft style typical of a romance or a magical girl type anime. In the manga, there is little use of shadow for atmosphere. There are dark scenes for the obvious reasons, but darkness isn't used thematically. I feel like that's a huge misstep. The artwork is beautiful, but it doesn't seem to fit the story. I hate to say it, but I feel like the style of art dumbs down what had the potential to be a sophisticated tale. This manga takes the approach of slowly maturing and becoming less straightforward as it progresses. The first few stories are interchangeable. Basically, a bad person ruins a good person's life, and the good person sends the evil person to hell and lives happily ever after. The manga is rough around the edges as far as being an adaptation goes too. In the anime, part of the deal between the Hell Girl and her clients is that the deal must be finalized by the client pulling a red string from around a straw doll's neck. But this doll doesn't even appear in the first volume of the manga. Later on in later volumes, it magically reappears. I saw little details like that were overlooked and showed that a little more attention should have been put to the fine-tuning and honing and the editing. For example, I noticed inconsistent character name spelling. Talking about the story again, it seemed way too simplistic in the beginning. It didn't help that the innocent good people were drawn in such a way that you could easily tell them apart from the bad guys. And in addition, it seems like everyone who accesses the website is very young. Come on, a little more variety would have helped to make the characters stand out a lot more. I wonder if the blandness and similarity and general shallowness of the characters was intentional in order to give Enma I and her Three Stooges a little more intrigue by comparison. But the fact that it took 3 volumes for the writer to give the reader a bone as far as Ai's backstory goes sends out some mixed signals. Later chapters deal with more and more complex issues. The fact that humans hate each other enough that it's become a widespread practice to condemn each other. What happens when the website is abused? When people are too hasty to make judgments on each other and make mistakes. I liked when the formula deviated from the norm. That made for some truly gut-wrenching scenes. The manga is certainly weakest at its beginning, but there are certain flaws that persist throughout. For example, people's lives tend to go sour in these totally contrived and over-the-top ways. There's a chapter that has to deal with an old woman who volunteers to convert her backyard into a shelter for lost dogs. But it turns out she actually hates dogs and is abusing the protagonist's furry friend. No explanation or motive given for why the woman bothered to keep dogs in the first place. And people tend to turn on each other way too easily and dramatically. Middle school was portrayed as some kind of cult ruled by mob mentality, and if you fall out of favor, your life is over forever. Now, this could have been a clever study on young people putting too much emphasis on things that really won't matter in the long run. But unfortunately, the series doesn't really treat these issues with the gravity it should. I feel like even though the manga has some dark, heavy, serious themes, it stops short of actually taking itself seriously. The stories are kidified almost. They take place almost exclusively in middle school, and are usually over petty and unrealistic situations. For the most part, these stories seem to have happy endings. Well, happy in that the antagonist is defeated. The character who has prevailed usually ends on a soft smile and a vow to make the best of life. But what about the mental repercussions of knowing that you indirectly murdered someone? How about the psychological impact of the knowledge that you'll be going to hell? It's not a happy ending, and it bothers me that it's played off as one. The endings of these stories can get genuinely creepy. The guilty are dragged down to hell. They're not just dragged, they're dragged kicking and screaming, and often in a way that Ai's followers devise to send the wicked off in a delightfully karmic way. This seems mean-spirited and sadistic. I'm not gonna lie, it's entertaining and satisfying to watch at some times, but at other times, it's just uncomfortable. Ai's three cronies often ask if the condemned feels like apologizing. They never do, but what if they did? It seems odd for this to recur so many times without any explanation. Volume 3 is when Ai's backstory begins to appear. It is genuinely heartfelt, but rushed. I feel that much of the manga suffers from a frenetic pace due to the constraints of short stories. When it comes to the background of the main character, though, it really feels sloppy. For the most part, I like the way characterization and character development is handled, though. It's definitely understated, but that's the only type that would work. In flashbacks, we see glimpses of Ai's past self. In the present, she is very reserved and stingy with emotion. So it was really, really spectacular and effective to see her at a time of innocence, and to see her angry. When Ichimoku Ren receives his turn in the limelight, we learn that he was an object, specifically a sword, that became a spirit. He is burdened with the blood of countless humans on his hands, that he was forced to watch die, and he's become certain that humans exist to hate each other, but at the same time, he can't stand to watch them get hurt. What's more, it becomes apparent that all of these co-workers are outcasts, looking at humanity from the outside and not always liking what they see. But somehow they formed a tight bond, even if it always isn't expressed through words. A character named Kikari is introduced in the later volumes of the novel. Her origins are not explained, but I find her one of the better parts of the story because she basically says what the audience is thinking. She knows an awful lot about Ai's crew, and the jobs they take. I love the mystery in her character, the fact that she is left entirely open to interpretation. This is a quick read. There are 9 volumes of the manga in all, and it's entirely possible to marathon the entire manga series in one sitting. The story is a bit lacking in depth as far as the realism department goes, but it still manages to affect you emotionally. It's easy to get involved in the plights of the characters. Several moments earn cringes, and maybe even tears. Themes of the depravity that humankind can reach are prevalent, but are offset by goodness of many individuals. As mentioned before, there is some supernatural atmosphere. Ai apparently hasn't aged since she turned 13. She lives in a world of perpetual twilight. She disappears frequently, and she sends visions of punishment to those who deserve it. Besides that, Honeona can transform into a skeleton, Ichimoku Ren has a large eye on the crown of his head, and Wanyudo can transform into a fiery wheel or chariot. The world seems to be ours, modern and still evolving. It's nice to see the subtle magic and mysticism in a world slowly growing out of it. There's a lot of repetition in the manga. character designs, plights of characters, and most notably in Enma's Ai's speeches, which are basically iconic of the show. In a story of the week format, some repetition is unavoidable, but I found myself skimming and probably messing up the pacing for myself, as well as disregarding some fantastic artwork just because I couldn't handle reading Ai's speech again. There's also another weird thing that the manga changes from the anime, and that's that most of the middle school kids who summon Ai know her. She's in their class. Why? How does that make sense? I really didn't get that choice. Another oddity in the writing was that every time the characters were in trouble, there would just happen to be other characters having a conversation about the Hell Correspondence website, and the character who is having trouble would just happen to overhear it. That's some convenient contrivance, and congratulations to me, I have just finished my quota of alliteration for the day. Jigoku Shoujo was an anime first. Does the anime hold up? Absolutely. A lot of careful thought went into the designs of the characters, their clothing, mannerisms, everything that makes them unique. I personally feel that it becomes more compelling in the second half of its first season when it deviates from scenario of the week format and becomes a serialized story. Ai's background is explored more thoroughly in the anime and becomes a point of contention for her. There are also human characters that get involved with her, Tsugumi and Hajime, who seem one note at first but prove to have a lot more depth than could have ever been expected. The anime is full of many twists and turns, and if there's one word I could use for it, it would be surprising. It explores themes that I didn't expect to be explored and does it in unpredictable ways. It sells itself short in its first few episodes and becomes stronger and stronger. I will say I think it started to lose steam when the Tsugumi and Hajime storyline ended and the series started to stretch out to include another boy in a similar situation that I was in during her lifetime. All in all, Jigoku Shoujo has a strong first season with a lukewarm second season. Would I recommend the manga? Yes, even if you're not a manga fan. This is the sort of story that I could see appealing to anyone, regardless of whether they generally care for the style. The intelligence of the story is reason enough to check it out, but it's also exceedingly self-aware. Miyuki Eito includes small bits of self-parody, and even parodies Ai and other characters in shorts at the end of the books. The art is standard, but not bad to look at. The stories are entertaining and not too long of a read. Overall, I give this whole manga set a grade of 4 stars out of 5. Would I recommend the anime? That's kind of tough. If it was just the first season, I'd have to say yes without hesitation. The second season can be a deal breaker. Either you'll like it or you won't. The anime came first and is very different from the manga, but both are worthwhile stories. I'd say at least give the first season of the anime a try, but don't feel too bad about skipping the rest. And hey, looks like anime and manga are tied because I would give Jigoku Shoujo the anime a solid score of 4 stars out of 5. How do you like your stories? How do you like your schools? If you answered respectively Sideways and Wayside, then my next review might be right up your alley. If you join me next time, we'll be exploring Louis Sachar's nostalgic novel, Sideways Stories from Wayside School. Till next time, I'm your friendly neighborhood librarian, signing out.
You're in my world now, not your world. And I got friends on the other side. He's got friends on the other side. That's an echo, gentlemen. Just a little something we have here in Louisiana. A little